So here's an episode that I wasn't exactly ready to get down on. That's not because I don't like a medieval, it's actually the opposite. I love a medieval, and I can talk about it for like forever. But really, it's more that in working on a series called The History of FPS, there's certain titles that I want to save for that series. A medieval was one of them, since it's a member of what I like to think of as the holy trinity of the boomer shooter renaissance. But after talking about Heretic, I got a lot of questions and then requests about making a video on a medieval. And with the game's DLC, The Black Labyrinth, due to come out any fucking time now, 2.5 years with a release date of soon is just a little too close to blue balls here, guys. I figured, you know what? Sure, this is as good a time as any to stop, drop, and roll into talking about a game that means a lot to me. And when I say that, I mean I wouldn't be creating content on this platform if it wasn't for this game. Let's rewind a second. Way back to December 2019. I was in a bit of a stressed out situation. My job was draining, I didn't get to see my family as often as I'd liked, my stepdaughter was a month away from corrective heart surgery, it was the fucking holidays, so I was thinking that I needed to switch a few things up in order to help keep my mental health afloat. One of those things that I decided to do was to intentionally spend the year 2020 diving into the genre of fantasy. Well, for a long time, I really hated fantasy. I mean, really hated it. If it had dragons, or magic, or characters with more than one apostrophe in their names, I was just completely uninterested. Which I didn't really understand for a long time, because I love the Lord of the Rings movies. Fellowship of the Ring is the best film that I have ever seen, ever. Hands down, no competition. But I had this irrational, burning hatred towards the fantasy genre for the longest time. So at the end of 2019, I said, fuck it, do I really hate this genre, or am I just prejudiced, you know? Am I actually really turned off by swords and sorcery, or am I just biased for some reason? Also around this time, I had started watching Civi's videos, many of which are wonderful throwbacks to FPS games that I had played as a kid, and also a bunch that I had never heard of, but he made a really good video on a medieval that you should go watch, once you're done with mine. And after seeing the colorful graphics and the sci-fi influences at play, I decided, okay, a medieval is going to be the first fantasy title that I'm going to get into, kind of soft open before I got into the really hard fantasy shit. I plowed through the game. I loved it, and I came out on the other end begging for more. So naturally, the next fantasy game that I played was Skyrim. I hate how much I love Skyrim, because, I mean, everybody loves Skyrim, so I'm supposed to hate on it, but it's really, really fucking good. Anyways, Skyrim led to me choosing to play through the Witcher trilogy, which I loved. The third game in the series made me cry multiple times over, but by the time I reached the end of the Wild Hunt, something just wasn't sitting right with me. I was enjoying the Witcher series, but I couldn't quite place my fingers on why I wasn't enjoying it as much as Skyrim or a medieval. After a lot of consideration, I finally realized that maybe it was the perspective shift, that maybe playing games in first person was what I really wanted to be doing. So by this time, it's, I don't know, April of 2020, and we're fucking balls deep in a pandemic lockdown, so I fired up Heretic, I beat that, I played Hexen, and I beat that, I played Hexen 2, I beat that, and realized, yeah, I wanted to play first-person games. This then led to me playing through Doom for the very first time. I'd played through Knee Deep in the Dead countless times when I was younger, but I never played through the full game, and this took me down a dark and twisted journey through the rest of the Doom series, in order up through Doom Eternal, which I ended up sinking 200 hours into. I literally spent the second half of 2020 playing nothing but Doom, and in rediscovering my love for first-person shooters, that was how I decided that I wanted to make videos just like Civi and G-Man, and the rest is history. Here we are, kids, and I owe it all to my experience playing a medieval. I don't know if I can overstate what this game means to me. It's emblematic of a simpler time, a time when I found myself searching for something solid to hold on to in the midst of a personal crisis, both mentally and physically. And without realizing it, I rediscovered a love of first-person shooters. See, kids, I might be the Quake dad, but in the mid-2000s, it was a dark time for my relationship with shooters. I didn't have a very powerful PC at the time, so I couldn't run a lot of the newer stuff that was coming out. The last big-name FPS title that I played on release was Half-Life 2 in 2004. I tried to play Quake 4 in 2005, but I accidentally bought the wrong graphics card and couldn't run the game. Meanwhile, more and more shooters were coming out with more complex gaming mechanics and focused more on being compatible with consoles rather than with providing classic experiences like their forebears. As far as first-person shooters are concerned, 2011 might be the most disappointing year of all time, with the releases of both Rage and Duke Nukem Forever. And seeing as how I didn't want to play shooters on consoles because mouse and keyboard are superior, motherfucker, I kind of fell off the wagon for a while. But now that takes us all the way to here, Amid Evil, a game that literally rejuvenated my love for a genre that I didn't know I had missed so much, and helped usher in a new era of boomer shooters for all of us to enjoy. Amid Evil was originally announced on October 25th, 2017, developed by Indefatigable and published by New Blood. What's neat about this is that the game's co-creators, Leon Zawada and Simon Rance, both previously worked on a little game called Rise of the Triad. No, not that one, this one. Rot 2013 was an Interceptor joint, a game that had other such future big names involved such as Dave Oshry and Andrew Hulshult. So when it came time for Zawada and Rance's new studio, Indefatigable, to work on their first game, of course Oshry's New Blood would publish it, and of course Hulshult would write the soundtrack for it. Because the FPS community is about community, goddammit, and when the tide rises, we all rise with it. And more opportunities for us means more games for us, and more games for us means more opportunities for us. So send the elevator back down. Offer that helping hand. Friends open doors for friends. We're all here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And god damn it, there's plenty of gum for everyone. So let's fucking go! What's worth noting here is that Zawada and Rance have been friends since they were children, and that they not only collaborated on Doom mods in their youth, they also crafted a total conversion of Rise of the Triad, which they titled Return of the Triad. Amid Evil actually began life as a Doom mod that the pair created all the way back in 1997. Shout out to 25 years of Amid Evil. But while the mod itself was never completed, the duo held on to the work that they had done, including concepts and mechanics, and over time would give these ideas new life after their experience working on Rot 2013. By this point, the tools that they were working with had evolved as well, so instead of utilizing the Doom engine, Indefatigable built Amid Evil using the motherfucking Unreal 4 engine. Yes, all of this that you're seeing is a product of Unreal 4, which I had no fucking idea when I came back to revisit this game. Holy shit. I mean, in hindsight, it certainly explains some of the truly impressive lighting effects, just for starters. And while it does make sense for them to go in this direction as they had plenty of experience with Unreal Engine 3 developing Rot 2013, it's still wholly unexpected if you didn't already know that this is the fucking Unreal Engine. Yes, I know, the Unreal logo pops up at the beginning of the game always after the New Blood logos and Indefatigable, but I skip those. I don't pay attention to that shit. I just genuinely didn't think that Unreal Engine 4 was capable of making stuff that looked this crunchy, you know? I mean, replaying this game while I had marveled over the graphical presentation when I first played it, now having really spent some time knee-deep in other modern and classic FPS titles, man oh man did I appreciate the throwback nature of the aesthetics here. 2D sprites for weapons and pickups? Yes, this is a fucking sprite. Are you fucking kidding me? The texture mapping went through a process intentionally designed to create graphics that were literally pulled straight out of 1998, with rough pixelation when you get up close to objects and surfaces, but done in a way so that everything would still have the proper shading from light sources. This was all born out of an Unreal Engine 4 demo that Rance created, with 3D environments and 2D weapon sprites, and from there the team stuck to that aesthetic concept for the remainder of development. Amid Evil entered early access March 12, 2018, containing the first 3 out of 7 eventual episodes: the Astral Equinox, Domain of the Sentinels, and the Sacred Path. And during the course of development up until the final release on June 20th, 2019, I almost typed 1998 instead of 2019. This game did not release in 1998, Jesus Christ. Up until the final release on June 20th, 2019, the updates saw the rollout of the final 4 episodes: the Solar Solstice, the Forges, the Arcane Expanse, and the Void. And since release, Indefatigable have released a number of quality of life and graphical updates, such as the weapon wheel and also support for ray tracing. Any of you kids watching this video who've been in the community for a while already know that Amid Evil was an absolute smash upon release, overwhelming overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, an overall 85 on Metacritic, and Civi was quoted as saying, "It made his dick hard enough to cut glass." With the upcoming prequel DLC, The Black Labyrinth, looking to drop at some point this year, a medieval star just really couldn't be higher. That's the kind of thing about these early access shooters that I'm finding really refreshing. We get the chance to hop on the gravy train early, we get to watch it evolve and develop over time with a constant string of updates and notes from developers, so news and interest in the game feel evergreen despite the fact that, as of this writing, this is a game that we have all been talking about for a little over 5 years now. A Medieval does not feel like it has been an aspect of the community for that long, and yet it had an announcement date of October 2017, early access launch March 2018, full release June 2019, prequel DLC announced November 2020. A Medieval, like other early access titles, has benefited from the slow rollout of content and constant quality updates, which has kept it on the forefront of shooters to keep an eye on and watch out for updates on Twitter. If the gameplay had been forgettable, if the concept had been a little more tropey, then maybe we wouldn't still be discussing this game right now. But as it stands, Indefatigable did the nigh impossible with the creation of this game, a neat trick that Dusk had pulled off only a short time earlier than this, which is to craft a modern first-person shooter with classic shooter mindset and tone, dragging the genre of boomer shooters into the present tense, alive and well, ripping and tearing. And it's about damn time we talk about how good this shit is. Dad jokes. The setup for the main plot of the game is pretty simple. We get a quick narration explaining how evil has consumed the worlds of this reality and that the Guardians of the Realms failed to stop this invasion of darkness, and a mysterious voice, referring to us only as the Champion, pleads for us to take up our axe in the fight against the Void and return peace to the peoples of these worlds. We're dropped into a distractingly peaceful and stunningly gorgeous hub called the Gateway of the Ancients, and after we've completed the first episode, Astral Equinox, from here we're off to pretty much play the episodes in whatever order we want. Due to the dark fantasy inspirations and settings and the way weapons work utilizing mana, a lot of gamers have compared the game to the Heretic and Hexen series, which is fine. They're both dark fantasy shooters with magic-based weaponry and nameless warriors fighting evil. But in this playthrough, I found myself comparing the game more closely to Quake than I would have imagined before working on this video. The hub, the layout of the individual missions, the overarching story of fighting our way through sci-fi and medieval-influenced realms, all on the path towards defeating an eldritch evil. Yeah, up until this time around, I would have fallen in the same camp comparing it to Heretic, but hot damn, we've got some dark fantasy Quake up in this bitch. Let's go. You know what that means, kids. Somewhere out there in the multiverse, there's a champion ranger. Please don't get that multiverse shit started up yet. We've barely started covering all the time travel stuff that's happening in the background of your stupid videos. I think you mean our stupid videos, since, you know, you're me from the future. Oh, you sweet summer child. If only you knew. Wait, what are you talking about? No time. I have to get back to fixing the timeline. So don't fucking start up this multiverse shit. I really don't have time to try and fix that mess either. Jesus, alright already. Where was I? Oh yeah, right. It's not really unfair to compare this game to Heretic and Hexen. Don't get me wrong at all. There are quite a few things about this title that do seem to borrow heavily from those classic titles, which makes them the obvious starting point for listing inspirations. Dark fantasy setting, magic-based projectile weapons that draw from differently colored mana pools, an insurmountable evil that has basically conquered everything already. We've even got some switch hunting puzzles tossed about liberally. But where a medieval sets itself apart from other Heretic-style fantasy shooters is in aesthetics and execution of the campaign. With 7 separate episodes, you'd be forgiven at first for thinking that a medieval is a really long game. I mean, sure, it kind of is. I clocked in about 8.5 hours of gameplay playing on hard difficulty. But in actuality, going through these 7 episodes, they kind of play off of each other in a way where it comes together as a cohesive whole to create 3 large mega episodes and 1 bookend chapter to act as a confusingly explosive climax to it all. See, each of these worlds/episodes play with environments and themes that act like, well, not entirely like rival factions or worlds, but 2 sides to a single coin. For example, the Astral Equinox is centered around themes of the night, with symbols representing the moon present in both architecture and in enemy design, as well as an overall moodiness with darkened environments. On the flip side is the solar solstice, which is bright, sunny, populated by creatures driven by flames and sunlight. The domain of the Sentinels houses plant-like parasitic beings and is full of vines and greenery, while the Sacred Path is more arid and rocky. The 2 episodes that truly feature two ends of opposing forces playing off of each other are the Arcane Expanse, which is devoted solely to magic and seekers of arcane wisdom with creatures that shatter like glass, and the Forges, which is practically one giant machine, filled to the brim with robotic beings armed with lasers and other sci-fi weaponry, and houses perhaps the most impressive visuals of the entire game. The final episode, The Void, is the only one that stands solo, a visually brain-teasing delight that has no respect for architectural values or spatial navigation. The Void is the home of the evil that has corrupted the lands and all of its clearly Lovecraft-inspired minions. I mean, just look at this fucking thing. You'd think that this was a boss or something, but no, it's just set dressing for the level design. You won't even notice that it's there unless you purposefully turn around during one of the Void levels and go the wrong way. It doesn't attack you, you can't damage it, and the worst thing that happens is you take damage if you intentionally run into it. It's just bizarre and unsettling, and I love it. Considering that each of the 7 episodes only runs 4 levels each, with 3 standard issue campaign levels followed by 1 boss level, the game never hovers too long in any one particular biome, which then creates ample opportunity for scenery changes and relearning new enemies to dance with in combat. While Amid Evil does flirt with standard enemy templates that you will be able to recognize in different forms across the episodes, they do come with enough changes to their attack patterns, appearances, and overall stamina that, while you'll be able to recognize the template that each one fulfills, even the smallest variations in how to handle them breathes effortless amounts of life into combat situations. Melee enemies, ranged enemies, large tank enemies, flying enemies. You're going to run into a lot of similar archetypes throughout the course of the game, but Indefatigable has brilliantly put time and resources into making them look, feel, and react so differently for each class of villain that it's almost downright criminal how good all of this works. And speaking of variations in design, there needs to be so much praise doled out for just how extraordinarily different the 7 worlds all feel, each of them having distinct identities and flourish. This really feels like a lived-in world with fortresses, temples, churches, giant machines, and wide open expanses that reflect the values, beliefs, and devotions of the differing factions who inhabit this land. Amid Evil is a graphical powerhouse, as you kids can see from the footage on your screens, but the game doesn't just look good, it looks so fucking natural. Levels will flow from one to the next, sometimes teasing the next area off in the distance of the background, or showing you the area you've just left behind you. Many of the maps have non-linear design elements to them, asking players to backtrack multiple times in order to solve button puzzles and find keys, which when coupled with the bafflingly well-realized environments, feels at times less like a game inspired by Heretic and more like one drawing from the best elements of Skyrim. I'm the kind of dad who gets lost easily in games for some reason, depending on how the game is set up and how many visual markers there are to indicate to where to go next. And while Amid Evil did leave me scratching my head in a few places, I'm so used to taking my time to backtrack constantly anyway that I never felt truly lost. There was one segment during The Void which kind of left me a little frazzled, but that entire episode is designed to be disorienting and confusing anyway, so I gave it a pass. Furthering Skyrim comparisons is the luscious soundtrack from perennial favorite Andrew Hulshult. Like, holy shit. Hulshult's discography is mostly well known for the heavier, crunchier, metalier, metallic-ear, Hulshult does heavy metal-leaning combat music with the kind of aplomb that only really came back into vogue within the last few years, thanks to such soundtracks as the work that Mick Gordon did on the Doom games. Fucking pay the man! But one of the things that I think Hulshult doesn't nearly get enough credit for is his ability to write evocatively atmospheric music. Amid Evil is perhaps his finest effort when it comes to this particular strength of his. The soundtrack is lush, vibrant, at turns awe-inspiring, and ominous. Sometimes it creeps up on you during combat with drums interlaced amongst heavy synths conjuring imagery from sci-fi films of the 80s, yet it still slots itself perfectly within the universe that Amid Evil has constructed. The first time I played Amid Evil, the only reason I knew that this OST was composed by Hulshult was, again, because I had watched Civi's video, so I knew going in it was going to be his work. But if you walk into this game without knowing it, I think that there would be some who would be so taken aback to learn that it's his music here, simply because it is so different from the scores he's known for. But don't take that as a negative in any sense, because this soundtrack is dense, melodic, understated, expansive, and quite possibly his best work to date. Then again, I think I say that about every soundtrack he produces, so I might just be a fanboy. But you know what definitely stops this game from leaning completely into the Elder Scrolls? The motherfucking arsenal. Jesus Christ. Much like in Heretic, a medieval's dark fantasy weaponry is replete with fancy names, incredible effects, and downright vicious impact. First up, it's the Axe of the Black Labyrinth, a weapon so badass it actually has its own lore. Sure, each of these weapons have codex entries. There's a codex in the game where you can read about enemies and weapons and stuff, because fantasy. And while each weapon codex entry details a little bit more about the weapon itself and where it comes from, feeding into the idea that each of them were created by one of the different factions that we see in each of the episodes, man, the Axe of the Black Labyrinth is the one that truly stands out as the most iconic. It's a weapon that can only be gained by braving the trial of the Black Labyrinth. And the properties of the axe act like a magnet for evil, literally drawing in dark forces towards the weapon in order to cleave them in half quicker, which you'll notice it actually does in-game. Furthermore, the codex states that the axe always seems to return to the labyrinth whenever the current bearer dies, leaving a nice little teaser that there could be multiple entries in this series with different champions, but always the same axe. Meanwhile, with the rest of the arsenal, we've got the Staff of the Azure Orb, utilizing blue mana and homing projectiles, which might sound like cheesing a little bit, but let me tell you, especially playing this on hard, you're gonna have plenty of times where you'll be low on health or trying to catch an opponent off guard who is somewhere out of sight, or you'll just be really tired of aiming at flying enemies, and this weapon is super fucking handy when you need it. We've also got the Whisper's Edge, a green mana weapon, which slices the air with emerald energy. What's neat about this attack is that if part of the energy slice hits an enemy, the remainder of the slice could still keep going and hit another enemy either behind it or just the side. Great for groups. The Voltrite is a trident that fires lightning, and sometimes it feels like it's just a little too underpowered for how much blue mana you can cruise through while holding down the fire button, but the upside is that if you get an overkill with it, meaning you do more damage than the enemy's total HP value, then what will happen is that the enemy will explode and shoot out chain lightning towards any other nearby enemies, oftentimes killing them in one hit. This is beastly. I ended up using the Voltrite a lot whenever I wanted to try and get that chain lightning attack on groups to clear the board quicker. We've also got the Celestial Claw, the only weapon which uses orange mana and acts kind of like our rocket launcher of the game. It's a magical staff shaped like a tree branch which summons planets, shrinks them down, and then shoots them like rockets. I shit you not, the Celestial Claw literally lets you throw planets at enemies. This is fucking insane. You can even see how it summons a new planet every time the claw reloads, so you're not just shooting the same projectile over and over, you're literally consuming the satellites of the universe to defeat evil. Bad ass. Then we've got the Star of Torment, our other green mana weapon, and quite possibly my favorite in this game. The star throws crystalline spikes at enemies, impaling them and slowing them down, and on a death strike will send enemies flying backwards so hard they'll sometimes be crucified against a nearby wall. It just doesn't get much better than this. But then we get to what is essentially the BFG of the game, the Eternum, which is well, it's a thing. The codex entry is just as mystified about it as we are, so that's neat. But it's the only weapon that runs on purple mana, the most scarce mana in the game. And it fires a massive blast of energy that explodes into multiple purple energy beams and will one-shot most enemies in the game. Monsters made of sterner stuff will tank one hit, but 2 hits from this puppy and they're toast. Absolutely a room cleaner. But you do have to be careful because the initial projectile only travels so far before it bursts, so you have to make sure that you're close enough to enemies to make sure that you're not wasting that very precious purple mana. Combat, though, has a nifty twist similar to Heretic's Tomes of Power. As you kill monsters in a medieval, each of them will drop different sized soul orbs upon their death. Some of them drop small souls, some drop large souls. There are even huge orbs of soul energy lying about called legendary souls. As you collect these, you'll fill up a meter underneath your HP gauge on the HUD. Once the meter is full, you click Alt Fire, and suddenly all of your weapons are supercharged with a devastating high power attack. The Voltrite now fires a stream of electrical energy which almost guarantees a chain lightning overkill. The Celestial Claw starts shooting fucking stars. And the Eternum? Well, instead of the BFG blast, it drops a goddamn black hole which will suck in enemies for a guaranteed one-hit kill on everything except bosses. And it is so powerful that even the champion can get sucked into it if you're not careful. The soul meter is the true game changer here. And another thing about it is that you can go into the settings menu and change your options so that you can either right-click to activate the meter, like I prefer, or you can set it so the soul charge will immediately activate on its own once the meter is full. There's pros and cons to both playstyles, but I personally prefer to save my charge and alt-fire when I'm ready to lay the smack down on some jabronis. I think I might be showing my age with that joke. But at this point in the video, you would be forgiven for maybe frowning slightly at the amount of unabashed praise that I've been ladling here. I mean, medieval can't be that good, can it? I mean, it can be, and it actually is, except for one minor thing that I'd like to address. The forges are a fucking slog. So here, looking at this footage, which is a visual treat, mind you, you can see here just how radically different the forges are from the rest of the game. Where pretty much 90% of a medieval is clearly drawn from dark fantasy influences on the more medieval side of the spectrum, the forges are a massive, sci-fi influenced, Warhammer 40k evocative landscape that is essentially one giant super machine created by one of the factions of these realms. Technology rules this episode, not magic or nature or astrology, which is really fucking cool at first, because we've got these incredible visuals. Incredible. I mean, fucking look at all this. Foggy environments that cause a bit of bloom around every light source that appears, metallic surfaces, and more angular architecture to reflect the technological bent, rain, thunder, weather effects that are just so good. But I just cannot abide by the fucking level and enemy design of this episode. The pacing and the enjoyment of the entire game comes to a slow, crawling halt that I just couldn't believe at how little I enjoyed this episode during this playthrough. And part of the problem comes in the platforming elements at play. Now, a medieval's platforming works fairly well for the most part in the rest of the game. This is due in part to the control scheme. Controls handle well, tight for the most part, but the run speed consistently felt just a little too uneven for my liking. The brisk walk speed is decent, and while holding shift to run works well enough when circle strafing, somehow it doesn't really feel like that much of a speed boost. Somehow walking feels like I'm walking just a little too quickly, and running feels like I'm running just a little too slowly. I don't know, there's something about the walking and running speed in this game that just never quite clicked for me or felt natural compared to the weapon handling and other movement aspects of the game. And in the forges, this slight disconnect really comes to light. Now, generally speaking, gauging jumps and being able to climb up out of pools of water have few consequences other than the player needs to try again if they miss their target, since there's no fall damage in the game. But here in the forges, and to an extent in the arcane expanse, there are so many moving pieces of machinery that we need to leap onto or over or across, many of which require delicate timing, that the number of times I just couldn't seem to land any jumps required of me felt insurmountably obscene. Normally, that on its own isn't too big of a deal. This happens. Sometimes developers make areas full of jumps and platforming that are just a little too wide or just a little too tricky for players to be able to just bunny hop across, and it can be a little frustrating when the jumps just don't seem to line up as naturally as the devs imagined that they did. But with the enemies, the goddamn cock-sucking, ass-fucking, shit-fucked enemies here can go suck a fuck. You can quote me on that. The Forges is not the penultimate episode of this game, but it sure feels like it. In fact, there really isn't an episode order, really. Outside of the mandatory first episode, Astral Equinox, the champion finds himself able to roam about the Gateway Hub freely and able to access the episodes in pretty much whatever order he chooses, unlocking the void once all the other episodes are finished. And since you essentially pistol start each episode with the axe no matter what, there's really no incentive to run the episodes in any particular order. But the enemies in the Forges are so mean. They're so fucking cruel. Saving the Forges for second to last is what I would recommend for anyone doing a playthrough of this game. It's just full of robotic nuisances that hit hard, hit fast, and always seem to hit you first even when you think that you've seen them first. The basic ranged enemies launch goddamn harpoons at you. The upgraded version of those launch hookshot harpoons and will drag you towards them for a devastating up-close melee attack. The basic melee enemies are rolling spike balls that come at you in groups of 4 at the very least, damaging you with their spikes. And when they die, they explode in green flames, so letting them get too close is just a really bad idea. The foggy atmosphere, while gorgeous, plays against your ability to combat monsters as well. Everywhere else in the game, you'll have a fair draw distance for which to see enemies coming at you, but in the opening level of the Forges, you'll be nearly blind until you see red laser beams penetrating the fog, with only a brief idea of their origin point for you to aim at. And don't get me started on the spike screamers. I don't know what they're actually called, and I refuse to look it up because they are disrespectful and don't deserve my respect in return. But basically, they're walking porcupine robots that, if they get a line of sight on you, will scream and shoot rapid-fire needles at you, which do so much damage that staying still for even a second or two will see a game over screen. Level layouts are confusing. There's an overabundance of pain floors that you have to stay off of, such as molten steel. The second level is titled The Crucible of Pain. And you know what? I don't remember the last time I had a developer basically give me a heads up that I was about to get dicked over like that. Now, I recognize that I played through this game on hard difficulty, so it is supposed to be hard. But I play all of these games on hard, or whatever the second highest hard difficulty is. There's a hidden evil difficulty, which is basically the equivalent of nightmare, so I'm playing on what I normally consider my metric. I measure an FPS by how playable it is on this difficulty, whether or not the gameplay and level design still work when the enemies are beefed up a bit. And you know what? For the most part, a Medieval is a brutal but fair game. Over the course of my 8 hours, I took my fair share of deaths, and I kept coming back for more, ready and invigorated. But here in the Forges, I just got so tired. So very, very tired of winding floors and spinning platforms and pain states. The Forges are a test, an intentionally hateful test that will put players through their paces. And while I do appreciate that in an FPS when executed well, this particular episode of the game is so grating that after I completed it, I groaned out loud when I saw that I still had one other episode to play through before I could get to the void. I'm sure there are strategies for beating these enemies quicker, and perhaps there will be cries of get good within the comments. But, and I say this lovingly, the Forges just absolutely suck the life out of this game, and I could not get out of them fast enough. Simultaneously, and perhaps ironically, the Forges features the most unique and possibly my favorite boss fight in the game. All of the boss fights at the end of each episode are pretty damn good experiences. No matter your level of skill, I guarantee that you'll find yourself getting through each of these bosses by the skin of your teeth. The first boss, the Moon Guardian, won't give you too much of a hard time as it's more of an introductory boss so players can get the feel for what future boss encounters will feel like. But, man... the rest of them, from the Corrupt Spirit, which is a living whirlwind of magic that tosses debris at the champion, to the Solar Saint with his devastating and nearly unpredictable leap and smash attack. I figured out how to work around it, just look up and follow his movements when he jumps. To the Twin Terror, which is a pair of ethereal serpents that you have to fight while suspended in gravity-defying liquid. These are all gonna have you running and sweating, but it's the Forge's boss, the Forge Master, who I enjoy the most despite the whole of the episode being so sloggy. Because the Forge Master is, at first, immune to attacks until you open up a sluice gate full of molten lead, and then you have to trick the Forge Master into walking beneath the lead in order to superheat his armor and make him vulnerable. It's tricksy, it's fun, and it made me wish that the rest of the Forges were this clever instead of just heart-thumpingly painful. To a lesser extent, the Void is also a touch of a slog, with its sometimes confusing, non-Euclidean level layouts, but the visual pizzazz and the Eldritch-inspired insanity of it maintains a steady flow, despite it being legitimately the most difficult episode of the whole game. Forges is painful and brutal to endure, but on the whole, the Void is far more balanced and much more sinister in being so. Eventually, all paths will converge on the final boss, the source of the corruption in the world, simply known as evil. And it will test every single skill you have picked up along the way during the course of this game. But with enough luck and just a little bit of intervention, you'll defeat evil and make your way to your final reward. A Medieval is not a perfect game, but it is a modern classic, and there's a reason why I've received multiple requests to talk about this one. It's also why shitting on the Forges feels, well, a little blasphemous. When we take into account the state of the FPS genre around the time of release and announcement, there really wasn't a lot going on for the boomer shooter renaissance yet. Rise of the Triad 2013 released in, 2013, arguably the origin point for the new wave of fast-paced boomer shooters. Wolfenstein: The New Order released in 2014, which set the stage for more AAA titles to buck trends and lean back into the traditions of old, something that was solidified by the release of Doom 2016. I'll let you guess when that game released. But a Medieval is one of the holy trinity of modern retro shooters that inspired the beautiful wave of indie FPS titles that we are enjoying today. Dusk, Amid Evil and Ion Fury were all in active development at the same time, and all released within 9 months of each other. Dusk in December 2018, Amid Evil in June 2019, and Ion Fury in August 2019. What a time that was! Even as someone who'd been on the outskirts of the first-person shooter genre because the genre had moved away from a style I enjoyed, I was casually finding interest in these new gems that were coming out, invoking the style and gameplay of 1997. Sure, there are plenty of indie shooters that were developed and released around that time, which all deserve praise for keeping the flames alive. But the success of these 3 key titles are what ignited the bonfires of the revival. And for me, someone who didn't truly understand that I was yearning to play new first-person shooters, experiencing Amid Evil at the tail end of 2019 was like going to church and finding my faith again. Sure, now, in hindsight and with a new perspective, I can see that Amid Evil isn't perfect. The controls don't lend well to the platforming segments, the run speed is just a little slower than I would like it to be, and the forges can just fuck right off. But everything else that this game does well, it does so well that it almost feels perfect by comparison. The combat is visceral and satisfying, the level design for 90% of the game is well thought out and executed fantastically, the visuals are a flawless combination of modern and retro, and the score is haunting to the point of being a masterwork. Amid Evil is a game that means something to me. It's a point of rediscovery, or rebirth if you will, during a point in my life where there was so much stress and heartache that it all felt insurmountable. Yet, here was an experience waiting for me to simply sit down and be embraced by a feeling I hadn't known in close to 15 years. Amid Evil gave me the gift of youth, of remembrance, and once I understood why that was, I was able to renew my interest in first-person shooters, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now without this game. I think we've all got those titles that maybe haven't stood up the way we remembered them, but we remember them a certain way because they were what we needed at a certain time in our lives. Maybe a game got you through a difficult period of depression, or loneliness, or the death of a loved one. Maybe a game got you through a harsh, stressful atmosphere, serving as an escape from the reality of, say, your college years or time during a rough relationship. These experiences have an almost holy quality to them in our memories, but sometimes that quality is viewed through the lens of nostalgia, so maybe these games don't always hold up the way we remembered them from back then. But does that fact really matter at the end of the day? I can't really say for everyone. I know that I've had some great relationships falter and end in breakup, and while the end of the journey may have been difficult, there's still incredible feelings of joy and happiness in those memories. Maybe a game that carried us through an important or crucial part of our lives might not still be the glowing experience we had with it, but that shouldn't take away from what it provided us during that time. From a critical standpoint, Amid Evil is an 8.5 out of 10. But for myself, from a sentimental standpoint, the importance of Amid Evil can't be quantified. Wolfenstein might be the first FPS that I ever played, and Quake might be the best one that I've ever played. But Amid Evil might be the most important FPS game I've ever played because it simply led me back to the fold and to this community when I needed it most. I'll never forget that. Alright kids, that's enough mushy sentiment for one day. I hope you've enjoyed our little chat about Amid Evil. Let me know in the comments how wrong I am about the forges. Also, let me know what FPS games you played that got you into this genre. If you enjoyed this video, please do the YouTube thing with the liking and the subscribing. And if you want to do more to support my work, I have a Patreon you can donate to for as little as $1 a month for early access to every video I produce. There's a link in the description for that. Thank you again as always, kids. Remember to stay hydrated, sit up straight, go hug your mom if you can. I'll see you next time.